Cool.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
I'm David.
Richard here again.
And
This is Saito Summer number 8, I think. So just becoming a quite regular update, which we're enjoying, and a little bit of a different format today. I thought we'd just record this and push it up onto YouTube and share it later.
We're busy coding. We're busy doing a bunch of stuff. So we're going to be as efficient as possible. First, we want to give you guys updates on various things that have happened that aren't the big announcement. 2, what's the big announcement for this week? And then 3, we want to tackle some questions that we saw come in on Twitter, on Red Square, and on Saito TG yesterday when we asked for them. So Richard, first, it's kind of like flotsam and jetsam because we've always got people working on stuff. And they're patching and fixing things. But it's not like a big announcement. But what should we let people know has happened?
Well, so I think we've been tunneling away on a few things. We've got Khan working on the compilable apps, which I think is...
We don't know about that. You didn't hear that?
No, you didn't hear that. No. Sorry, I'm just thinking which way to start with.
Okay. The stuff that we said we would tell people.
Right. In the list over here.
We've done some work on video call.
Yes.
And on game casting. Okay. You guys reported bugs with those. So we think they're fixed. Things like the crackling audio again. I noticed with game casting, we had someone play around with one of the they're experimenting with one of the one-player games, for instance, Saito Mania, and the updates were really slow. There's a reason for that. We're working on that. We're still working on trying to figure out what the best approach is. The reason is if you click on the button and you just want things to work, we have to kind of recreate the DOM and then broadcast that, and that slows it down and it makes it not suitable for like first-player games.
Yeah, well, I think it's also because there's a difference. Like with a first-player game, you actually just want to do a screencast a la Twitch. Whereas with poker, for instance, obviously you don't want to show people what's on your screen if you're revealing your cards. So there's different modes, and we're just looking at the best way to handle each different kind of game.
So it's different modes, but it's also technical. We're probably looking towards settings where you can opt into one and opt out of the other. But the way to solve that problem, there's a mode. We know how to do it. The problem is it requires the browser to pop up this window and says, hey, what tab do you want to select?
It's security stuff we can't get around or don't want to get around, but it means we can't give you as slick an experience as possible because it's controlling the experience. The browser's making sure stuff's not like hijacking you.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're playing around with. Keep using it, keep giving feedback and complaints, because when we see stuff like that, we know people are trying, we know where it's adequate, where it's inadequate. So yeah, a bunch of video calling game casting work is happening. Khan is working on some super secret stuff.
I think there's also been, people have been noticing, we've seen good comments about it, a lot of... You've been on a broken Windows kick as well and just going around tightening stuff up. So if you see something that's just a little bug somewhere, like let us know because that's all polished and it's all important.
I was going to say also, Mark and others have been working on the wiki. We're trying to improve it. We're moving towards a world where we are approaching Saito. We think that part of Saito that they're going to hit depends on their intent. So we've got the wiki where we're trying to put anything that's substantial. And so you'll see like the application section has been totally overhauled. There used to be a bunch of stuff there that's valuable, but it's filler. And so we're trying to have it much simpler. And then every page that someone might click on, they're going to get a great...
I think this is stuff, again, we're going through. We've got a good sense of, we're trying to be much clearer with the different paths people will take, what they're coming to do where. So people who want to play a game, they'll follow a certain path. And there's sort of people who want to actually use the apps, or there's people who want to experience Saito, or there's people who want to learn something about Saito or do something with Saito, and catching them, getting them to the right place, and then making sure what they get to is as clear as possible.
Basically, like, because we get some people with feedback, I think it especially happens with Red Square where people show up and they're like, I want you to use this opportunity to explain to people what Saito is. And it's like, actually, if someone's coming to Red Square, we want to give them the best social media experience. And sitting them down and saying, look, this is a blockchain, here's a consensus mechanism, is not always the right way. So we're approaching, there's the wiki, there's Saito.io, which is a splash page. The brochureware website is probably going to shift to that eventually. And then we've got the individual apps. And so we're trying to have people's experience, their introduction to Saito depend on what kind of intent they show when they show up. Because someone who shows up at the wiki is they're ready to read, whereas someone who shows up at Red Square or the arcade is not looking for a lot of text. But you can check out the wiki. We'd love feedback on that. I think it's a big improvement. The application section is beautiful.
Yep.
And the dev section is going to get some updates soon.
Yep.
So anything else? Game casting, video calling.
I suppose it's lots of minor things, and then some just straight up community suggestions that have come into the UI and things like that as well, which we'll mention a bit later on as well.
Okay. Let's get to the kind of the big feature release that's happening this week is encompassed in something we call the profile module. And so to explain what this is and why it matters, I'd like to explain just briefly some of the problems that you have with a network wallet like Saito. Previously, there's things like, oh, can I upload an NFT to my account? We're showing the identicon. Or can I upload this? Can I upload an image? And the problem with this is that if you naively let people do it, you then in your wallet are saving someone's 10 gigabyte file because they decided to upload a profile pic that's massive. And if you let 10 people do this, or you let 100 people do it, you're exhausting your browser memory. You don't really have control over what you're displaying. And even the act of just loading Saito becomes really slow because your browser is now dealing with hundreds of megabytes worth of image data or just ancillary other data.
Well, there's also questions about where and how you get updated with those things. So that's one thing people might not realize about the identicon is that the identicon is generated from your key and it's unique to your key.
Yeah.
So it costs 0 size in your storage to hold it because you can simply generate it from the key. And also, as soon as you're communicating with someone on Saito, you know their key, so you can get their icon out of the key. So it's a very important part of the peer-to-peer experience because it gives you a visual take without having to read QSMVT on who you're dealing with. So you can quickly go and spot, oh, here's the yellow Swiss flag or whatever.
It's that Twitter thing or email where there's always a scammer that changes the I into an L. And even if you're looking for it, you can get fooled on a first pass. And anyway.
Right. So it's important protection against that. And you see it in MetaMask and stuff, which is kind of where we got the idea that it's there just so you can't easily be tricked, like David's saying. Anyway, moving back to...
Anyway, we got the wallet. The wallet, by default in your browser, you've got about 5 megabytes of space. After 5 megabytes, some browsers will give you more, but we're going to blow out... You don't want to be blowing out the wallet by adding all of this crap. But at the same time, we increasingly want people to be able to broadcast information about them and their identity and their account that is not just the key. And so how do you do it? Well, the profile module that we are releasing, I guess tomorrow, may go up later today, solves this. It has space for things like a banner image. It has space for things like an NFT image. So we've got support for both of those. One's a square, and the other is the banner, like the top of Twitter. It also allows us to do things like include a list of archive nodes. So if you remember with Twitter, we've kind of been slowly moving towards this model where you can get your tweets from anyone. The problem is, of course, if we're all browsers, then I'm not online when you're online. And so I can't just check your machine to get tweets from you. And so the profile module is letting us do things like, I can specify, if I'm not online, if you can't connect to me, here is a server that is running an archive node that has my tweets on it. So you are my friend and you know the servers, you can ask them for my content.
And you can ask your friends too. So the same way Red Square works, if you've got a buddy, if your buddy updates their profile with a cool new picture and then logs off, goes to bed.
Yeah.
But you connect with a friend in between who's got that updated image. They can share that with you. So it's a way of broadcasting this stuff around without making everybody have to be online all the time.
it can be images, it can be tweets, it can be blog posts.
Yeah.
We can have a Saito related blog post where it's, we're thinking about how do we get Saito.tech. The most valuable thing there, I think, is the blog archive, and we need to figure out a way to get it onto the network. One idea is, well, we'll put the blog posts into transactions, we'll stuff them on a server, and if you're friends with Saito the network, you can access all of these blog posts. So this is what's coming with Profile module. It's basically an abstracted way to handle fat data that's associated with your account that we can't just stuff into the wallet, because as soon as you let people save that stuff in the wallet, you're opening an attack vector. So, if you make a friend, they'll be able to have images, they'll be able to have NFTs, all of this stuff.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of beautiful small things. I mean, it's obviously a work in progress. You're going to see. We're expecting to start seeing people on Red Square upload profile images, profile banners. Richard, I saw yours. It's nice.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're expecting to see that. If you have private group chats, it works as well. So this is a generic solution that's addressing the key. So any application where there's a key, a public key that's serving as identity, you can now upload banners, upload descriptions, upload images.
There's two sides to that too, because I think something people don't realize necessarily unless we explain it is, if you're in a chat group on a public key infrastructure blockchain like Saito, then how do I get the messages from our chat group about the best waffles and beer in town? And I could either decide, well, when I join the group, I could collect all the keys from everybody in the group and then listen to all of the messages to all of those people, and then only pay attention if it's to the group I'm in, and then have a decryption key that way. So I'm getting deluged with all this information that's encrypted, but not for me. Another way of handling it, which profiles enable, is to allow an idea like a chat group to be essentially a first-class citizen on the network, like a user, right? So that chat group can have an identity and it can have a key. We just send messages to that. So when I join a chat group, I can have an open chat group. I just join it, and then I listen to all the messages to that key, or I get them from archive servers or my friends if I'm offline, and I can keep up to speed with that chat. That creates a whole bunch of stuff we can do with not just chat groups, but that's the easy one to understand, but with calls, with groups of different kinds, with games, all sorts of things can now have this profile. Another good one is that people will understand quickly is hashtags, right? So you can have a hashtag where you just send messages to a topic. The topic has a profile page, it gets all of its tweets there, and people can curate that. It could be opt-in, or it can be general, it can be private, whatever.
We're gonna talk about Red Square UI UX in a bit, because we got some questions. But maybe this kind of shows people that there's a lot of tech work that goes behind the ability to do this, right? Because they're very naive ways of doing this. Oh, I'm just going to let someone upload an image, and the way to do that, you're adding a central server, and we've got to be architecting this stuff in a way that there is no central server. It's Swarm. And so this is it. This is the profile image. You can now have profile posts, and those profile posts can include information. These are my archive modules. This is my public key, of course. This is my banner. This is my description, and you are cryptographically signing it, so we know it comes from you. It goes out into the network, or it can be uploaded to your archive node. So that's the big thing. It's the profile module and the support that it has for these various images. And before we go and answer questions, I think it is important to talk long-term about how this connects to NFT support. And I want to have this conversation because one of the things I've noticed with Saito Summer, and I think, Richard, you've kind of noticed the same, is that we're trying to structure conversation week by week. And that means...
we're trying to just respond also to the fact that we haven't really changed our release cadence or the amount of code we're putting out, the speed with which things are changing. But I think one thing that really has been visible because of Saito Summer and that we've managed to improve on is letting people know about it and surfacing it in a regular communication to people so they get to see just how much is going on. But having said that, going back to what you
forget, right? So I think it's an opportunity for us to pull back and say, well, why are we doing this? How does this tie into the bigger picture with NFTs? Obviously, we want the ability for people to have NFTs running on Saito, and it's a perfect use case for getting a banner image, getting a profile image. So there is work that's actually happening. We've got an approach that we'll be sharing documentation on shortly called Bound UTXO, which provide us with an on-chain way of actually having fractional NFTs. So you can have an NFT, and you can even
you can have FTs. You can also create fungible tokens this way.
Well, it's like the amount of a certain amount. So you could have 1 million of these tokens. That's your NFT, but you could fractionalize it.
So
send transactions at 66% here and 33% there. Kind of interesting.
I mean, it gives us crazy tokenization possibilities for such a simple mechanism that still will perform at massive scale. Because you could have a thing that is owned in percentages because you can split up the NFT. You could have an NFT that's a classic NFT, just itself and nothing but, or you could have something where it's divisible, so those are fungible. Any part of it is the same as any other part of it. In which case, you could essentially create a token. You could say, I'm going to create Davecoin and release it that way.
Yeah. So we're going to come out with the details on that tomorrow, maybe over the weekend, for people to take a look at. For feedback, suggestions, you're welcome to take a look. Love to get feedback. We've got, I think we've talked a bit about the transaction security at low transaction fee volume, which is being worked on at the same time. So we've got implementation of this technique. At the same time, we've made progress on low transaction throughput security. I don't know if that's running on prod. It may already be running on prod. We haven't talked about it.
It is running on prod with a zero threshold at the moment. So essentially, it's the mechanism is there, but it's not kind of in gear yet because so we tested it, but we're just not running it yet because there's other pieces that need to be in place for it to be running.
It's happening. We're working on this. This is kind of a prerequisite for Realms. So we see both of these two pieces as prereqs for doing the game coding with Realms. The artwork is done. We still need to code the game. And we're going to start that after we have the ability to, the transaction format for the NFTs. We can parse them so we know who has what. If you're showing a game,
we'll also need to have a basic read, edit, write system, right? We'll have to have a UI for minting or a method for minting and a way to see and interrogate where they're at, etc., who owns them. Obviously, to be able to get going with this.
So Saito Summer Week 8, it's literally been 7 days since our last drop. Profile and NFT support, but I think it's good to pull it back and give people
just before we do, I think we missed just saying as well, another response to community feedback. We had great feedback from file transfer earlier, and people had feedback and also glitches they were noticing in the UI, particularly as they started trying to send each other their perfectly legal Linux ISOs immediately at 5 gig files. And so we've put a lot of work into improving resumption and improved the display of progress, etc., so you can see a better picture of what the other person is receiving, etc.
It sometimes screw up right at the very end, right?
Well, it was this thing where it was a funny bug because we hadn't anticipated, because it was the internet. It's kind of like relativistic travel, right? The file was being sent to the other person, but it was actually being cached by pieces along the way. So if the file's big enough, part of it's actually being stored on the routers and the machines that are shifting the packets along. And so the sender has finished sending and they haven't received any errors and they might stop, but the person at the other end hasn't received all of those packets, but because the sender's finished, essentially the process gets terminated and they haven't got the whole file. To see that, we had to have people on different networks testing it with large files. The thing to do is simply only stop when you know that the person on the other end has received the last packet. That's all fixed now. So there's a bunch of fixes like that. It's slicker and quicker and better to use generally. So I think Dan also added multiple file send and a few other pieces that people requested.
So thank you to people who've tested that and tried that. It's
Mm-hmm.
improving. But yeah, the big picture, a bunch of minor improvements as always based on the feedback. The more concrete it is, the better. And the more tied it is to, I was trying to use this because I want to use this,
Yeah.
it didn't work, or I needed this, that stuff's a priority. We've got the profile module, profile images, banners, descriptions, both for your profile as well as for private group chats.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's got any application. If you give that application a public key, private key pair, it can have this support too.
Yep.
And that includes things like archive nodes, pointing people towards things. So Swarm stuff is happening. It's part of the NFT progress, which is happening as we've talked about. So it's a good reminder. With that said, we did have, I think, 3 questions that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so we've got a few, and if we don't get to your question specifically now, we hope that some of what we'll say is relevant anyway, because we're going to get a little bit meta at the end. But also we'll possibly be able to get back to you in different modes at different times as well.
So the first question I want to talk about is it came in on Saito TG. Great question.
Yeah.
It was, I think it's Monish, it's what are the organic marketing objectives for 2024, 2025? This followed a conversation where people were chatting just a little bit about, like, why aren't we at token 2049 in Singapore? There's a reason for that, actually. But the question was, okay, well, what are organic marketing objectives for the next year?
Well, I think the really interesting thing to me about this, which I said to David when he kind of pointed me to this question, was the first thing that I noticed is that organic sitting in, the word organic sitting in there, because it really raises an important question in my mind, which is, well, what kind of marketing are we doing, and how do we categorize it? So I think for us, there's definitely places where we get really genuinely organic growth, in the sense that, people use a thing we built, they like it, they bring it to other people, and we've got a growing community. It's never where we'd want it to be, obviously, in terms of pace of growth, but this is a genuine achievement that I don't think a lot of projects have necessarily, and particularly around, say, TS as a game. That's got, to the point that the players annoy everybody else by just dropping TS ? into community chat,
because it's because a bunch of them don't speak English. People don't realize this. It's right. It's like, you don't speak English. You're not going to be like that. Get TS. Duke will yell at you.
Yeah. But so at the same time, we've got people who are using. We know, because sometimes we get troubleshoot issues with guys. Like I was trying to call my grandma or talk to my girlfriend on the beach or whatever on Saito chat. So we know those things have that kind of classical sense of organic growth. And I think what we were talking about earlier kind of gets down to this, and like, we do understand that there's these different channels, different segments of people who are coming for different reasons. And one of the things we can look at is kind of where we have organic growth in those groups, and where should we be doing work to create inorganic, artificial growth by promoting, by pushing, by doing different things.
I try to maybe answer it in a less abstract way, right? We do have organic growth. We're getting organic growth, I think, primarily around the arcade with specific games. TS usage is going up. We're seeing it with the video calls. Because people can just hop on and use it. I don't think we're really necessarily seeing it with Red Square. And I think one of the interesting questions is, there's a subset of the community, primarily around crypto Twitter, whose experience with social media is Twitter. And so when they come to Saito, they come to Red Square because that's all they use. And then that's their first impression. And then that's like, okay, what kind of organic marketing? I think we saw that and people tend to be very hype focused in that subset of the community, right? Like, we got a bunch of people who are like, oh, the Brazilian issues with Twitter, let's go and promote Red Square. And it's like, well, if it's not good enough yet, it's probably not a good idea to get against a bunch of Portuguese speaking Brazilians. Like, if we're having trouble creating a community there because it's not good enough, Portuguese-speaking Brazilians are probably not going to be doing a better job. But I think it goes to show that, like, what people's understanding of an organic user is depends often on thinking about who they are, right? Like, the Chinese players who are coming for games, they're attitude towards gaming is totally different than someone who is a crypto speculator who's trying to figure out, oh, look, is Red Square versus Farcaster, what's it going to be? So for organic growth and marketing reach out, for me, an organic user is anybody who wants to be here.
Yep.
And they want to be here for a reason that's connected with Saito. They like the apps, they like the vision, they like the consensus, and they want to support that. And I'd even extend that to someone who wants to, be generally into crypto and speculate, because I think there's people like that. And yeah, that can be organic reach out too.
Yeah.
So what is our organic marketing strategy? What's our strategy for getting more of these people? One, always we look at the applications that are getting use and growth, and we try to improve them. Yep. So Settlers, the UI, the graphics, the visual, it's been a long process of improving that. We're still putting resources into it. TS as well. We've got some new games that are targeting that are of the same sort for the same sort of user. We've also got experiments with things like realms and NFTs where we're trying to get these other applications up. So organic marketing, one, a lot of the app work is focused on this. There are things that we don't control. We don't control the pace at which other people can understand routing work. I'm personally getting skeptical that a bunch of people in computer science are intellectually capable of it. But we can't control that. We can't control the amount of curiosity that people necessarily have. So that kind of marketing reach out, I think, is harder for us to talk about, because I don't like on those things. How do we make someone curious about Saito? I don't know. We have this app first. We have the app first development model, which is what we're building. That's the Bitcoin model. You build the software, you let people do it, and then they get creative and interested. But like we can't go and make someone who's a graduate student interested in publishing on something that is.
I think, yeah, and looping back to Token 2049, I mean, one of the reasons we're not there is I've been to Consensus and to other places and tried pushing Saito. I've been to industry conferences in the Malta Blockchain Week, et cetera, a bunch of times. We've done that. We've seen the response we got. We are looking at doing maybe the DevCon and the Dev Conflict before it this year in Bangkok, because those are places where the discussion and the attendees are more attuned to what we're doing. So we see it as a richer source of really useful conversations and people who might be curious. It's not
things change. I agree that Token 49 is not it, because it's any of those big conferences where if they're having keynote panels on BTC store of value, that's
or like which meme coin is the cutest at either end of those things. That's not a space that's rich with opportunities for us. So I like Singapore. I'd love to go and spend some time there, but I don't think it would be more than a junket for us. It would be very hard for us to get value for the project out of time.
We could easily go. I'm in Thailand. It would be easy to fly down. Like we've actually, the Token 2049, the Dubai version as well. Bear in mind also, like we're hit up by people who try to get us to come and they try to sell us shit. And we look at what they're selling, and you know exactly what the conference is going to be like by seeing the way that they're engaging and reaching out to people. A lot of those, it's going to be low-level booth farm with a bunch of garbage, basically. And then, keynote panels on BTC as store of value. So those conferences aren't for us. Others are, though. So we are kind of selectively focusing on those. As far as organic reach out goes, anything that gets people curious and interested in Saito is positive.
Yep.
We're not like, sometimes we're like, what's your marketing plan? It's like, we don't have someone sitting down here and writing a document about this stuff because we're a small team. I think if we had someone who's sitting writing a document about this, it would be, not that it would be poorly executed, but it would be a bad sign for the project. It would mean we're not flexible enough to do it.
It's also not something that we've, I think this is also a theme that sometimes people sort of say, when are you hiring a marketing director, et cetera, not knowing the project history, or that we've had people in those sorts of roles and not had a lot of success in it before. That doesn't mean there isn't a time and a place and a better person, better briefed where that might make sense in the future. But it's not like an aversion to doing that. It's
Well,
about the specific situation we're in and trying to execute.
And I think being realistic about it. So let's step right back to the question: what are the marketing goals, organic marketing goals? It's to get more people aware of Saito and get more people to be curious about it. Spreading routing work as a concept and category. That's all we care about in terms of organic marketing outreach at this point. We've got the token persistence curve, which is bringing on the monetary applications, but we feel absolutely no pressure on rushing that because we like what we're doing and we like the time also to think about things. I think there is this misconception. People think that like there's this ton of tech work that we're not doing that could deliver token persistence today. We could drop token persistence today by changing a variable. It wouldn't help us. We need to have more apps. We need to have more development, and we need the network to have the utility as it grows towards.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bigger dev burden when you're
supporting.
I
think that there are things that people raise, some of which we'll get to in a minute, but around developer acquisition or around polish and so forth with the applications, where we're saying those things need to be in place. We acknowledge what people are saying, and we are working on that. Maybe we haven't talked enough about what we are doing, but those things all need to come together. So people aren't necessarily wrong with those things. It's often not being aware of where we're at exactly.
With Saito Summer, right? Like with Saito Summer, it is actually a marketing initiative. It's a marketing initiative in the sense that we're looking before and we're saying, well, we're doing all of this stuff. No one talks about it. Let's structure things weekly and push out this news. And so the fact that we're talking about the profile, that it doesn't mean that this other stuff is happening, but it does mean that some people are like, oh, why aren't you working on Red Square? Or why aren't you working on this? And the answer is usually we are. Let's move on to the second question. I hope the organic marketing is weird because it's like, well, what's the plan for this? And it's like, well, the community, anyone can do organic marketing. Why don't we move on to the second one, which I think comes from Ash. And Ash's question was, he's like, okay, I'm interested in tracking metrics around adoption or something. And people keep telling me, come to Red Square, go to the arcade. Why aren't you just preparing a slide sheet of metrics about adoption and stuff so I can check in weekly? And I can give a direct answer to that. The answer is that we produce a metric shit ton of stuff. And our experience is that producing that stuff and preparing that stuff doesn't tend to make people happy because the challenge isn't the information existing. The challenge is that people want things to be very easy to consume. However, we are a small dev team and we are a small project. And what that means is that we do not have a full-time staff member handling the equivalent of blockchain FOIA requests for someone who has this kind of interest. So what we try to make sure is that if there is a legitimate need for information, there's a way to get it. So for metrics around utility adoption 1, you can get it by eyeballing Red Square. You can get it by coming to the arcade because you're literally seeing activity. We're making changes as well to make things more visible. One of the things I don't think we've mentioned is now, if you're on Red Square and there's a Swarmcast that's happening, you'll see it.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to join this kind of stuff in real time. We're trying to make things more visible. The leaderboards, you can see how many games people are playing if you really want to. If you're looking for someone else to prepare a package for you that has those numbers in it, there's what information is in that package? 2, are you capable of doing it? And so this is kind of the attitude it's my attitude. I think it's generally the attitude of the team is that we want people to have this information, but we are well aware that you can't spoon feed people information because we can put out all of these blog posts, we can put stuff on the wiki, and people will still show up and they'll say, well, explain it to me. So,
or just
what we're trying, or they fight it, whatever, who cares? We're looking towards the wiki being the place for content-rich information. If there is a need for this sort of thing that is beyond, check the arcade, check Red Square, right? Like if you care about this, the expectation is that you are familiar enough that you're going to be able to look at Red Square today and realize how much more active it is than 4 months ago.
Yeah.
But if you need something else, this is what to do. Take the initiative, figure out what it is, figure out how you want that information to be presented and prepared, and then you can participate with us in getting that information out. So like the direct answer is figure out what you need, and then we can figure out by working with you how to get that information out, because we'd love it too. What we're not going to do, we're not going to put dev resources that are working on the things that are actually delivering the features into preparing things that might be theoretically needed by someone who kind of wants it now in TG. Does that make sense, Richard? I mean, it's kind of a mix, because it's not like people want. It's not the answer people want.
I think so. I think maybe it's sort of coming across in a contrary way, but I think we do have a lot of experience of trying to do things and then being told, "Oh, well, that's not what I wanted," etc. And we've burned time and effort on it as well. So we are keen on improving our game across the board. And if there's something that people need or want that they can, we're happy to be part of the conversation, but articulate clearly, then we can work on getting that out. And we do have some, things in train. Again, people aren't necessarily aware of what's actually in train that will be helpful.
Yeah, it's also like it's a product of how we structure the reach out we're doing. Like Saito Summer, the ability for us to talk and push these features and get people aware of them is coming at the expense that there's this other stuff that we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Right? Because if we talked about everything, it would take us hours every week.
Speaking of which, we're at the 40-minute mark, and I think we wanted to try and keep this tight. So maybe we should move on to the next question, and then so that we leave space for that meta discussion.
Let's quickly address the Red Square UI UX things, because we keep hearing this, and I don't think people. I think sometimes people think, "Oh, nothing's happening."
Yeah.
One, stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Two, I want to take just like 3 to 4 minutes and explain why this isn't the thing that people think it is. People think, "Oh, just hire a designer." Yeah. We have actually hired designers in the past, and generally, unless they know exactly what the website is supposed to look like and exactly what features it has, they don't come back with stuff that's useful.
Yeah.
You come back with the skin of Twitter.
Yeah, I think we could see. Well, there's a bunch of things to include into that. So to help draw that picture, there's the information that we gave at the start of this discussion about the reason we have the identicons, right? So if you understand those things, then you can see why it's not simply a matter of just cloning Twitter. I mean, I almost feel guilty about how much we've ripped off from Twitter with the UI. So there's, it's sort of, but there are also then challenges. So we need to work that kind of knowledge in about why we've been doing that. At the same time, for instance, DigiRock/SciToddler Alex, the 2 videos that he made where it was a bit of a back and forth between him and me. He did 2 videos and I responded to them in the comments. That did yield a bunch of changes that when we made them in the next, within 24 hours, literally, we got really positive responses. Small things like the ability to see to visualize the difference between layers that were overlaid over things, tightening that up, and spacing and things like that. They happened really quickly. And thanks, Alex, for all that feedback.
It's very frustrating. I engage to provide feedback, but seriously, write it down. Like if you're gonna record 15 to 20 minutes of video and you can't write down.
I prefer video than reading something, so I found the format fine.
Send it to Richard.
Send videos to me. Send text to David.
The structural issues. I'm actually also on the different page than you. I think cloning Twitter is great. I see things like the current HTML components make that impossible. So to reskin, it's small stuff like the indenting and the way those side notifications help track the thread. I think Red Square absolutely needs to improve there, but we need to be redoing those basic components. Those components date back to a year ago when Red Square was just getting pushed out. There's no difference between a parent post and a child post in terms of the HTML.
So I think this is getting back to the thing. So I mean, basically the message here is we are aware of this and we are working on it. If we're not handling the thing that's irritating you right now or perfect yet, well, here's an explanation of what's going on. Let's
a second to tell people how they can productively engage. That might be useful. I actually want to spend the time, rather than say this, actually communicate to people about What are the challenges? Because people are like, hire a designer. Well, one, designers don't know what's on the page. They can't do it.
That
Two,
was
if they
the point
don't
I was
know
getting
things
to.
like,
Was
don't know things like, okay, like a profile image, just update your profile image. It's like, okay, yeah, your model, if the model is a centralized server, the design is also off. We've got things like the calendar. Stuff is happening here that we're not talking about because it's under process. Do you have a calendar on the page? Do you have advertisements there? How do you handle the threading? All of this stuff it's not just a design issue. So for things like this, the other issue I want to say is repeatedly, we've seen that people will say, oh, it's a design issue. And you ask them to articulate, and it's not a design issue. So this isn't saying that we're not looking at design as an important thing. This is when we ask someone to articulate their concerns.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out, actually, is this a design issue? Because if it's something else, it may be something else that can be fixed or tweaked or tested that doesn't affect the design at all. And then,
well, it might affect the look, but it's not actually about the CSS. It's about
it might affect look or layout or structure. Like, I really don't like in the middle of those threads, we've got this response thing. I think that looks hideous, but it does seem to result in an uptick in usage. So knowing that, okay, well, if this improves things, if we know we need to do it, you know, that's affecting what you're coming into the design with.
Well, it's also, I mean, a good way to maybe put it, sort of getting to before, is there's this interrelation between ability to do things, like the introduction of profiles before, and then what kind of job we could give to a designer and whether it's an achievable job. Because if the designer comes along and says, look, these identicons are ruining everything, then we have to think about the security questions we were talking about earlier and how we address them if we want to remove identicons. So we need to be able to give designers a brief that works. So again, with Alex's feedback, where there were things that was like, here's a design issue and it's wrong, and it was clearly articulated as a design issue, we happily hopped on it because he was right. Whereas with a lot of these other things, it's not that we're not attending to it and we're hearing people very clearly. It's just fitting it into the machinery of building out a genuine peer-to-peer application that is changing as we build it, and getting the design right is difficult, where also constantly finding ourselves in a different place. Like maybe it's time to come back and revisit some things. We did the theming kind of I don't know what you'd call it, arc. We had people come and design different themes and push different themes onto the site about 5-6 months ago, and that was really helpful because it did result in changes across the board. It changed the default theme, but also we learned that we kind of learned more about the relationship between these CSS, these design elements, and the function, and what we can and can't achieve with themes, because you can go and put on another theme and see how much it does for the good and how much it doesn't achieve. And that helps us like work out how and when do we get design people in to improve what. So it's not not listening.
It's all of this stuff is happening. And so for me, looking at something like Red Square, I think the next time we do a CSS sweep, design sweep, is when we redo those components. And I'd like to actually see us move more towards Twitter in terms of UI. Because I noticed that Mastodon is following. So if it's becoming a standard, it may also just be that anything that's a slight difference from the standard starts rubbing people the wrong way.
Sometimes we might.
So I'd like, although I do like multiple likes. Let's move on, because we're getting on it. And I think part of this, closing by saying, look, there is a good way of interacting with the project, because I think a lot of questions that people have, it's like they want to talk about things we're not talking about, or why aren't you doing this? And I've come up with 3. The first thing, the most important thing to do if you are going to talk to us, like we're an open source project.
Most helpful thing for us,
1, build social consensus. You coming to us and saying this, okay, it's like one person who said that. It really helps us if we see social consensus around prioritization of things. That's why Red Square it started as a community project. That's why it's getting dev love. That's why it's getting constant iteration, because we know that people care about it, because there's community consensus around this being important. Be aware of that. Like just showing up and saying, oh, X, I want Y, X, Y, when Z, all of that stuff. community consensus matters. Richard?
Yeah, I think, and also like hopefully we can improve the community general knowledge around what is going on and the state of things, so that is easier to achieve, but also is more informed. So that we can then, instead of sounding like we're being defensive all the time, we're actually having a better conversation.
Yeah. So social consensus, build consensus, right? Because if the entire community has the vibe that actually Red Square is the most important thing, we might actually have different conversation with the community, because that might be actually we're seeing growth in these areas, and we're seeing Red Square is kind of it's replacing Telegram as a place we have Saito conversations, but it's not a massive growth channel itself. We can have these conversations publicly, and it might pull out information from us that you guys don't know that might actually change people's opinion. So one, social consensus matters. Two, sweat effort matters, right? Because everyone has an opinion. Everyone on the team has an opinion. The thing that separates an opinion that we know someone cares about is if they're doing any effort in pursuit of communicating that, right? So like the video, it's something, writing stuff down on text matters too, right? This is why we generally ask people, if you're not satisfied with an app, have you thought about doing a usability review?
Yeah.
What is that? That's open Google Docs. Take a screenshot of 5 things that you hate about it and send it in. And that might lead to Richard.
There was a longer post today, which I have a draft response to because it was thoughtful and went into detail about a bunch of things. So I think, that does help us a lot. I think it's also the classic thing of like rubber ducking, right? In the process of clearly articulating what your issue is, you kind of understand it better, and that helps us a lot because it becomes something that's much more ready to be understood and responded to than a kind of quick drive.
My favorite example is we used to get a bunch of UI complaints, and we looked into them and we realized the problem was that people were not secure and confident that their posts were being remembered by the system. Yeah. And the UI complaints are about X, but it's like, well, why do people have these concerns? It's because they've made a post and they can't find it.
Yeah, it's bad was actually about the fact that the system didn't show them a particular response rather than the look of it, right? But it was often articulated as it looks wrong.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is why we ask for details. Articulation is a really important part of sweat effort, because it shows us that you're thinking about the problem. It's also a really important part of consensus generation, because it's kind of shifting from having, I'm a user, I've got some opinion, the dev teams are bad guys or whatever, it's like me versus the dev team. That's not what it is. We've got the community. And when the community has consensus on things tend to get prioritized. NFT, this work, is a result of, I think, the consensus.
There's a bunch of marketing and other outreach efforts and things where people have come to us with plans, and we've supported them in financially or done it ourselves or participated or whatever, where it's prepped and ready to go, where there's clear way to help out.
Right. People come with proposals. I remember this is another thing. Like, I remember Alex saying, he's like, oh, why don't you just do $5 in Google AdSense a day? It's like, well, we have. Like, we've actually done this. Not only have we done this, when people in the community have come to us with proposals around do X, do Y, this is, again, it's the sweat effort thing. It's like, well, if someone wants to take this on an experiment, we generally do support them. And so
similar mentioning Ash again, to his credit, he asked a long time ago, why can't I develop in React? And right now I've got a prototype demo, like how you would do React development on Saito with him to see, is this useful? Is this really helpful? And that's come because he put in the effort to engage with me. We had a call about it, and he helped me understand where he was coming from. That makes it a lot easier to do something that's the next step. It's taken a while, but that's the next step, and there'll be another one, hopefully.
That's sweat equity right there. Someone's willing to do the work. It instantly separates this from someone who's brilliant armchair quarterbacking with no understanding. And I'd say that's 3. So 1, build social consensus, and that includes with us. 2, sweat effort, even if it's just documenting stuff.
Yep.
Pulling open a Google app, spend 10 minutes, take screenshots. It's like Shift Command 3 or Shift Command 4. You can screenshot the exact bit you want, put it in the doc, say, this is really ugly.
Something maybe we could help make it easy as well. But also the sweat effort can also be getting up to speed on previous conversations where things are at, right? So previous updates and roadmap updates, etc., may have covered this. And so, like, obviously it's easier for us if someone's put the effort of, like, if your context, if a comment or a request or a criticism, whatever it is, comes in the context of, this is my understanding of this thing you said, then that's much easier to understand where the conversation's up to and how to jump in and be helpful and respond.
Well, it's like the marketing outreach thing. It's like when people are saying, there's a couple of comments like, well, why aren't you making it easier for developers to do things? And it's like, yes, we are making it easier. You guys are going to love what Con is working on. I love it. I think it's brilliant. We're not talking about it because it's not done. We're also not talking about it yet because Saito Summer, the structure. So,
if we talk about all the different things that we're doing, then each person will presume that their favorite thing is happening next, and we end up disappointing everybody who's not first in the list. So we are a bit careful about saying what we're doing for that reason.
Stuff needs to be done in a certain order. One of the reasons the wiki is getting revamped is because the dev section is going to change with some of the changes that are going to come out soon. With that said, that's so one, build social consensus. 2, sweat effort, even if it's just documenting, right? And that's going to help with social consensus. The third, please, please, please understand the industry, because I think this is something where, a lot of, we've noticed, sometimes people will come and say, when this, and they get frustrated, and they've got a mental model of how the world works. In our experience, that mental model is often not accurate. And the things that people assume are obvious are simply not true. When you couple that with, we've got our own concerns about various strategies. What we're looking for, if someone is going to make a really abstract suggestion, because often a lot of the more problematic ones are these really abstract ones that are assuming that nothing's happening, we're not working on this, whatever. Like, why don't you do this? It's like a silver bullet suggestion. If you just did this, this is the only thing that's going to work. If you're talking to us, show us that you understand the industry and show us that you understand your concerns and understand our concerns, right? So if you're coming with a suggestion on tokenomics, show an awareness actually of, and not like a meme shitcoiner understanding of tokenomics, right? Like, well, if you list on Binance, this will happen. It's like, actually, we know what happens to tokens that list on Binance. So understand the industry, understand our concerns.
I think it's, or maybe look into, like, again, backstory of what we've said before, but also trying to assume that our perspective is if it's not like there's a make everything great button and we're refusing to press it. Right? There's a reason. Now, it's entirely possible we're not right. We've missed things, and we're definitely not right about everything, but it'll help move things forward a bit. And it's helpful to make the discussion productive if it includes an understanding of what exactly is the objective. For instance, listing on any given exchange, for 95%, 99% of projects, that's the sign that the project is dead within 6 months. Right? That's actually the truth, is that 90-something% of projects are dead within 6 months of listing on an exchange. That's the industry reality, and it's something that we're facing with. Okay, if I had tokens I wanted to dump, maybe I'd want to list on an exchange immediately so I can dump them, but that's not where we're at. And so, understanding the complexities of not being in that 99% is really, really challenging. And I think people see the top 5, 10, whatever projects that are hanging around and assume that that's the general story, and they're forgetting all the times that whatever it was, coin came and went, and it's just there. And that's the, I think for me, that's the meaning of what you're saying here, is come in with that perspective of maybe there's more to this than I'm understanding. It's not so simple as throw money around.
I can give a practical example. I had a conversation I thought was quite frustrating, because it was with someone who was supporting the project, nice guy. And it's like, okay, they're saying this stuff. I'm going to take time to actually chat with them about this. And after about 45 minutes, they kind of realize everything that they were complaining about is actually being done, and it's being done in this particular order for this particular reason. Now, there's a bunch of potential issues there. Like, well, why aren't people informed of what's happening, right? Can people be informed of what's happening? But there's also a certain amount of delusional filtering that happens, I think, in the absence of like a full information dump, right? Like the assumption that X isn't happening, or that there's no reason why people are doing this. Like, we don't have inflation. This is a brilliant thing for us. Proof of work and proof of stake, all of these networks are going to be inflationary.
Yep.
They're going to be inflationary at least 1.5 to 2% per year. Saito zero inflation, it's slightly marginally deflationary, actually. So we've got, but it creates a bootstrapping problem for us, which creates a need for applications, which creates a need for utility. And, you know, I remember this conversation clearly because it was like, well, why are you guys working on this? Why are you working on all of this stuff? And the sense was that we're doing this stuff instead of the more important things that need to happening. And it's like, well, one, actually, this is the most important stuff. And two, the suggestions that were, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Were all about modifying the applications that had work done to them within the last 2 to 3 weeks. Well, why don't you add this feature to video call? Well, it's like, well, look, you don't get the ability to add this feature to video call that you think is really important if video call doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And as of 2 weeks ago, video call was useless for this functionality. So understanding the industry means, one, understand generally in crypto what it is you're suggesting. If you get pushback from us, articulate, because there's reasons for it, but understand the bigger picture, right? Like, there's a reason that stuff is happening, and it's one of the easiest ways for us to dismiss someone who's coming to us, and maybe it's unfair, is
well, I think we're saying these things in the spirit of wanting conversations to be as productive as possible all the way around, right? We care deeply about Saito, and we do care what people are saying, thinking, and we really do want to make that as all of our interactions as helpful as possible. So these are things we're asking people. This, again, doesn't mean that we're not equally thinking. Saito Summer itself was a response to realizing we're not, communicating, what we're producing and what we're putting out there as clearly as we should be. So let's improve that. And I think that has improved. So I don't want it to sound like we're saying, you do this, you do this, you do this. This is coming out of a deep thought of how do we respond productively to help these conversations move better from all angles, including what we're doing.
Social consensus has the advantage that it's non-oppositional. And I think it's one of the reasons, like, put in the sweat effort, document stuff, talk to the community about it, as opposed to trying to talk to us directly about it. Don't have that broader understanding, don't kind of document. It's a different kind of communication.
Speaking of which, I'm really running out of time here. I've got a hard stop in a minute, but I hope that's helped clarify things for people. And it's, I think anything we've missed, like I said earlier, anything we've missed feedback wise and stuff, we'll try and get around to, either add it into future updates or engage on socials and stuff. And hopefully people come to Red Square and give us more of the useful feedback we've been getting. It is really helpful, and it is valued. And we can't say enough about how much we absolutely adore the community, because they're part of making this all work. And these interactions do help the project endlessly. So thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.